"Dr. Nichols," he corrected. "Please let me in." No. This was ridiculous. She was yelling at a bodyguard through her own closed door like she needed to bargain to make him go away. He wasn't getting into the room without forcing his way in, and if he tried, he would be fired before he could get past the first lock. Her father had some nerve. She'd allowed the detail to follow her because it seemed logical, but she did not need a bulldog watching her every step. Who did this guy think he was? And what kind of bodyguard looked like he had walked right off a runway somewhere? He was almost a full head taller than her, definitely a couple inches over 6 feet. He had short dark hair and soulful brown eyes, lined with just enough laugh lines to make him look sweet and gentle, and oh so sexy. He had the kind of even tan that only came naturally, and even though he was covered from head to toe, she could tell there were muscles rippling just below the surface. He wasn't the kind of guy she normally found herself attracted to. Mostly because he was the kind of guy that only existed in pornographic fantasies. There were plenty of hot doctors around, and hot lawyers, and hot stockbrokers, and hot baristas, but none of them held a candle to this Owen guy. It was too bad she had to ruin his life. Okay, that was probably a bit of an exaggeration. She just wanted to get him fired. She didn't care about the rest of his life. She wasn't going to let him come in to boss her around and babysit her. She didn't need it. She didn't want it. She wasn't going to have it. He knocked on the door again, but he didn't say anything this time. Stasia stared at the white wood for a long moment before pushing off and heading deeper into her condo. Let him stew. She didn't owe him anything. Eventually, he would realize that she wasn't listening. And luckily, she didn't have a neighbor, so even if he decided to wait outside her front door all day, no one would be there to question his presence. She didn't really care if the neighbors started to gossip, but she had decades of media training that made her shy away from the spotlight unless she was using it to her advantage. No one could break into her apartment to kidnap her if he was standing right outside the door. She hated that she even thought it. She hated that a small part of her wanted to let him inside, to take care of all of her problems and guard her until whatever problem her father had caused in her life was fixed by her father's money. But she'd learned a long time ago that letting her father dictate any aspect of her life led to him dictating every aspect. It started small, logical. Someone tried to kidnap her, so he offered personal protection. If they couldn't catch the guy, he would say she should move into his penthouse, since it was more secure than her building. Was that true? Sure. But she'd sacrifice a lot of personal security to stay out from under her father's thumb. She didn't have a job at the hospital anymore, and he had plenty of contacts who would be happy to hire her. And just like that, she would be wrapped up in a web of favors and responsibilities that she could never escape. She knew who her father was. He didn't love like a normal person. Some thought he was completely incapable of the emotion, but she knew it was more complex than that. To him, love was transactional. None of his wives had ever lived up to the concept, and she and her 9 siblings fell in and out of favor depending on his moods and their usefulness. Well, maybe the baby got a pass. For now. In another life, he would have been a king or a lord, dictating his will and whims out on the world. He didn't have a title, but he still used his wealth in the exact same way. She was free of him now, more or less, and she couldn't let this be another setback. It had taken nearly 2 years to climb her way out of the last setback that put her in her father's clutches. She didn't want to start all over again, even if starting over was exactly what she was doing right now. But at least it had nothing to do with her father. She picked her phone up from the kitchen counter and tried her father's number. She wasn't surprised when he didn't pick up, and she was immediately forwarded to his assistant's answering service. She hung up before leaving a message. If he wanted to talk, he would have picked up. Then she tried AR. If her father couldn't be reached, her oldest brother was almost as good. He was their father's right-hand man and heir. He did the family dirty work.